Hello, me again, Gary Kitchens. You may be used to me, or not, as a systems scientist and systems engineer. Now for something a bit different. Today I'm introducing Ape Ascending, a new book. You may find it controversial, but it was fun making it. Humans are the most complex systems on the planet. Each regards themselves as unique, curious, interesting, and unpredictable, although that may not be quite true. How did we evolve to be so physically coordinated and capable, as well as brainy? And in the process of evolution, have we somehow transcended our simian heritage, or are we still instinctive, hormone-driven animal under the skin? Evidence suggests we evolved not so much as individuals, but as self-organising family groups and clans, etc. So there appear to be two kinds of evolution at work: the biological or anatomical evolution, and socio-cultural evolution that has taken us from itinerant hunter-gatherer to settled farmers, through elegant civilised nation-states, onto medieval feudal empires, to global warmongers, and on to our present uneasy globalised stalemate. This is a diagram showing levels of organisation for early man, and it starts off at the bottom from the cell, which is the smallest item of living matter in a human or anything else. Lots of cells gather together to make a tissue. Tissues come together to make an organ. Organs come together to make an organ system. Organ systems come together to make a human, a child, an adult, or a female. And humans come together to make families, which I've shown as grandmother, father, mother, children, etc. Why grandmother? We'll see. Beyond family, we group into hunter-gatherer bands, tribes or clans, and then we form communities with populations of different species. Then there are ecosystems, communities of different sorts coming together, and then lots of ecosystems come together to form a biome, such as a lake, wetland, rainforest, or savanna. So why is the naked ape naked? And here's a diagram which purports to show why that happens. There is a theory that we are the only one of the great apes to be relatively free of hair over most of our bodies. We're also the only one that has subcutaneous fat. Male and female pair bonded, created shelter and encampment for females because they were burdened with offspring and couldn't follow the hunt, while the males went off to hunt. The female depended on pair-bonded male to bring back their share of the hunt to her and the children. And to encourage this, the human female became almost continuously available to the male, who might return from the hunt at any time. The hunter, and hence all of the family, supposedly evolved subcutaneous fat as an energy store to tide him over during long drawn-out hunts. He would then overheat during the chase with both subcutaneous fat and hair, so he lost the hair in order to survive. It's a good argument. But then there's the idea that we went through some sort of aquatic phase. So if we lost our hairy coats to stop from overheating, why did other plains carnivores not do likewise? Hyenas, dogs, cheetahs, etc. Unlike them, we sweat copiously in hot weather, losing precious salt and using vast amounts of water to keep cool. We evidently, if you think about it, are not adapted to life on the savannah. Cetaceans, whales and dolphins and so forth, have also lost most of their hair, and they too have copious subcutaneous fat, called blubber. Human feet are quite different from other great apes. They're better for standing still, walking and running, but better too for swimming. The upper surface serves as flippers, along with our flexible spines and longer legs. So while the bottom of the foot evolved for running and standing stock still, the top of the foot evolved perhaps for swimming. Moreover, humans have a diving reflex. If our face is put into water, reflex closes down the airways, slows the heart, and diverts blood to essential organs. No other great ape has this reflex. So could we perhaps have evolved, in part, as a littoral apes, living by rivers, by lakes, on islands, on shores, diving for fish and shellfish? And of course, our human hands have vestigial webbing between forefingers and thumbs, and between all fingers too, especially between the little finger and the forefinger. And each year, as we probably know, some babies are born with fully webbed fingers, which have to be surgically separated. It makes you think. So perhaps there were one or more littoral phases. And here's another of these causal loop models, and you can see at the bottom the one you've already seen, transitioning from, in this case, the aquatic fish eater to the open plains carnivore. But at the top we've got a transition from arboreal fruit eater to aquatic fish eater, in which we would be considered as diving for fish, and to catch the fish we would have to be more agile, have flexible spines, we would develop subcutaneous fat to deal with the cold, and we would lose body hair because it would stop us being streamlined. We would develop the diving reflex, we would have flat Peters flippers, and all of these would aid our performance and hence our survival. And if we were living on fish, the argument goes, then the high protein fish oil diet would contribute to our peculiarly interesting brain development. However, if that was the case, we would tend to run out of fish stocks as our population grew, which is shown in the middle of the diagram, and therefore the population to survive would have to transition onto the open plains carnivore. Is that what happened? Rocks show many strata from the period in the Rift Valley, indicating that there were deep lakes, which gave way to shallow lakes as the climate changed, which dried up to be arid with volcanic ash, and with the process then repeating in reverse, and so on, each cycle, with its various phases taking some 5,000 years. In 500,000 years there could be some 100 such cycles, presenting the possibility that early humans would have learnt to adapt to such continual change, or die. Moreover, each phase would possibly see them adapt a little before the climate changed, adapt a little to the next climate type, and so on. So humans may have adapted fully to none of the phases, but partially to all of them. Witness today's Kalahari Bushmen, who could live successfully in arid conditions, and Kenyan boys catching fish with their bare hands in lakes. Then there's the grandmother hypothesis. We all know that on average grandmothers live longer than grandfathers. This is possibly because grandmothers contributed more to group survival than perhaps grandfathers. Grandmothers would help nursing mothers gather, teach, nurture and protect offspring. And curiously, there's only 3 animals that go through the menopause: short-finned pilot whales, killer whales and humans. So mature mothers go through the menopause, no longer have children of their own, and are free to help and guide the next generations. And grandmothers spanned generations. They would have been repositories of how best to snare, cook, clean, avoid, survive, danger, find resources, and of ancestor knowledge and so on. Family groups may have been matriarchal, and grandmothers sustained the human formula for generating succeeding families with balanced, intelligent offspring. So here we have an n-squared chart of the nuclear family presented as a system. The members of the nuclear family are shown on the leading diagonal: grandmother, father, mother, daughter and son. And if you take each one of the rectangles, say grandmother, you can go in a horizontal and see what grandmother provides, and you can see by looking at the others what goes in. So if we go along on the top level on grandmother to be straight above mother, grandmother gives to mother support, help with the gathering and raising children. Similarly, father gives to mother security, meat, sex, love. Father gives to daughter security. Father gives to son security and education, and so on. And you can see that the whole setup pretty well locks together into a system. This shows how the nuclear family, including grandmother, is a close-knit system for propagating successive families of balanced, healthy adults in tightly pair-bonded, lasting relationships. It's not unreasonable to view the human nuclear family as a unit then, as a system for propagating successful family units. The offspring from each family is able to form and sustain new family units in their turn, and so on down through the ages. I note in passing that female mitochondrial DNA is unaltered from generation to generation, apart from any mutation. It passes down unchanged through the female line from great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, daughter, granddaughter, and so on. I'm not sure this is relevant, but mitochondrial DNA appears to have some relationship with longevity. Could it be that the grandmothers have got something special about their mitochondrial DNA which makes them live that little bit longer? Who knows? Here's a diagram showing this progression from generation to generation. Each nuclear family has potentially two grandmothers, father's mother and mother's mother. Which grandmother would become the nuclear family matriarch? Mother's mother? Father's mother? Both? It's not clear, but today it seems more often to be the mother's mother with the stronger bond. To confuse, however, it seems likely that maturing young women would leave the family group to join with a male in another family group, making it likely to be the young male's mother as ready-made matriarch. This is based on present-day bush people behaviour. This differs from elephants, for example, where young bulls are expelled from the family, which is matriarchal. Both practices seem to have evolved to avoid inbreeding, along with an evolved aversion to incest. So humans found and followed a system for propagating successful new families. Children were raised so they would be successful parents in their turn. But how? Well, newborns and infants were totally helpless, yet their brains would keep growing until age 7. They were surrounded by danger, insects, snakes, predators, disease, other humans, high infant mortality. So children would have been precious, especially in small, vulnerable populations of early humans. So infants were kept secluded, protected from the outside environment with minimal stimulation. They were kept warm with familiar smells, sounds and sight. There would have been very gentle home learning to speak, to feed, to wear and make clothes perhaps, to play, and there would be daily routines. And even today we cannot recall the first 3 years of our life. But those 3 years are known to be a major influence on an eventual adult as a balanced individual, able to sustain adult relationships in monogamous pair bonds. And that, of course, is strangely at odds with today's social engineering, where mothers are expected to return to work soon after birth. And infants are stimulated by nursery school, by what to them would be an alien childminder, and by intrusive digital environments even during the first few years. What effect does all of this have on the ability to be successful parents? Truthfully, we do not know. So we look at human activity. Now, this graph goes back to out of Africa, and there's a lot of arguments about that. It could have been 60,000 years ago, but some research shows that there were early humans found in Israel about 120,000 years ago. So out of Africa is an uncertain date. And was it once, or were there several groups going out of Africa at different times. So there's nothing known in that period, right up to about 10,000 years ago, when Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest temple, was built. Let's have a look a bit more at that. So here we see where we start to find some evidence. Now, humans may have gone back 200,000 years, but we only have evidence of what they were up to about 10,000 years ago, with Göbekli Tepe, then Çatalhöyük, and so on. And you can see the start of history is way to the right there, starting at about 3,500 BCE with the first writing. And there are gaps between Göbekli Tepe and Çatalhöyük and pre-dynastic Egypt, and we have no idea what was going on in those gaps. We know very little about our early prehistory. This is Göbekli Tepe, which means Potbelly Hill. It's been excavated since 1996 by Klaus Schmidt and his German archaeological team. The animals in the carving are a bovine, a fox, and a waterfowl, and they all appear to be dead. No writing, so no explanation of what the temple, if it was a temple, was about. Until its discovery, conventional wisdom had it that such structures would be built by settled communities only. But Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, no agriculture or husbandry. And there's Çatalhöyük, and you can see that was a Neolithic proto-city settlement in southern Anatolia. It's peculiar. There were domestic buildings, no public buildings. Many inhabitants lived in mud brick houses crammed together. There were no footpaths between the buildings or streets, so access was via holes in the roof, and the little buildings were rectangular. And they built on top of each other, so there are actually 18 levels superimposed on each other. The rooms were plastered and scrupulously clean, but middens, sewage, food waste, wood ash were all outside the ruins. People were buried in pits under the floors, in hearths, under beds, and under platforms. There was agriculture, but they still hunted and gathered too. And as you can see from the diagram, there were strange images of men with erect phalluses, red images of aurochs, they were early cattle, and stags, and vultures swooping down on headless figures. Curious. The first evidence of agriculture in Egypt came around about 4000 BC. There was agriculture, husbandry and fishing, with little sign of hunting except for royal lion hunting parties. Many images of warfare. That was the Four Dogs palette with lion, giraffe and ibis. This is a large ship painted on pottery. Here we have the bull palette with totems on the rope, and the bull representing Egypt is goring some foreigner. Here we have a royal lion hunt. You can see the men are all wearing strange helmets with eye holes. This is the hunter's palette in two parts. One part is from the British Museum, the other part is from the Louvre. And they are pursuing a lion hunt. And this is the handle of the small Gebel Arak knife, showing battle scene in 5 registers with men wearing masks, penis sheaths again, in hand-to-hand combat with maces and clubs. At the bottom of the picture, bodies are strewn between 2 different kinds of boats. Here we have one side of the Narmer palette, and the other side with very early hieroglyphs, mythical animals, very peculiar, lots of bulls around. And here we have the Libyan or towns palette. This shows 7 towns, each identified by their animal totem at the top. And some appear to show buildings within the walls. Each animal is holding the Mer hand plough to symbolise the town being founded or attacked. It's not clear which. And each town is identified by the earliest hieroglyphs inside each square. Now we switch across to Malta, 3600 to 2500 BCE. That was the Hajar-im, and there's very fat ladies. This is the Malta Venus, fat lady sleeping. Stipple altar with carved plant inset. A concealed space for a priest or oracle. And finally the oracle hole. We know very little about what went on in Malta. The population seemed to be either advised, guided or ruled by oracles. People came to the temple with their animals to make sacrifices, to seek either forgiveness or guidance, perhaps about planting times, ceremonies and so on. Most mysterious. Now we have the Egyptian Old Kingdom. At the left we can see Horus on the Serek, that's the bit at the bottom with funny lines, of King Jet. The snake is pronounced Jet. Elegant simplicity of line and perfectly balanced offset of the hawk to make room for its tail on the right. It's a beautiful piece of work. On the right, in contrast, we have a small ivory label showing King Den smiting his enemy with a mace, a scene which would recur time and time again throughout the following history. At the left we have King Khafre of the 4th dynasty, block carved out of diorite, a very hard form of granite, with a hawk at his neck suggesting some sort of symbiosis. At the right we have Prince Rahotep and his wife Nofret, smart young socialites about town. Note his neat moustache and her cleavage, carefully accentuated. At the left we have a humorous view of a bored baker waiting for his loaves to prove. And at the right we have Seneb the dwarf with his wife Senetitas the priestess. She is supporting him and their children, fingers in mouth, where his legs would have been, beautifully and sensitively crafted. Here we have the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, using royal cubits for length and seca for slope. And this displays balance and symmetry. Within that we have the Queen's Chamber, and you can see numerology in practice with the dimensions variously following 9, 10, 11 and 12 cubits. This is an architect's drawing of the Great Pyramid, showing working in 40 cubic chunks where possible, and hidden levels above the King's Chamber, top of the mound level and the underside level. There's much yet to find out, but it was very neatly, carefully done and mathematically precise. And here we have an imagining of the purpose of the architecture, which was A, to secure the king's mummy against all ills, physical and spirit world, and B, to serve as the world's first psychic machine to project and retrieve the king's car using the built-in passages as guides. Looking at the King's Chamber, you can see the guides went out to the southern and northern netherworlds, where at night time he could visit the various gods in the upper worlds. In daytime, down in the Queen's Chamber, he could, on the other hand, visit Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, so he could look after his people. Fascinating. Here we have the New Kingdom with the tomb of Nebamun, with wife and son wildfowling in the marshes, representing his view of his afterlife. This is magnificent artistry. It's 18th dynasty, 1400 to 1350 BCE, from Thebes. Here we have the tomb of Sennacherib at Deir el-Medina, the Valley of the Workers. This is a century later than the Nebamun work. Sennacherib with his wife Nefertiti in their heaven of 4 islands surrounded by ditches or dikes. They're spending their afterlife together in the country with only an ox to help them with the ploughing. Fraction and instruments. On the left are unitary fractions being used, amongst other things, in concocting medicines. And at the right we can see medical instruments, pincers, knives, hooks, suction cups, weighing balances, flasks, etc. This is from the later Ptolemaic period, from the tomb at Komombo. In many ways, the old and the new kingdoms of ancient Egypt may be seen as the apotheosis of civilization, admittedly from a distance. Of course, they lacked our technology, and they believed in spiritual explanations of many natural things and occurrences, but the people were self-actuating, educated, literate, cultured, and their lives had clear purpose. They lived contentedly in a vibrant society with a firm class structure, with a place for everybody, no social mobility, no democracy, and no apparent need. And they did not apparently suffer from the human condition. From here on in it would appear to be downhill, not least for that human condition: Romans, Huns, Vikings, and Dark Ages. So what of the ingenious ape today? What of that human condition? It's controversial. Humans are self-aware and introspective. They're concerned about uncertain futures, what becomes of us when we die, and our offspring, and that we're alone inside our minds. Human self-reflection. We're able to think about our own thinking, to wonder, is all this real, or just in our minds? René Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, settled that at least in his mind. We seem fascinated about the end of days, the end of time, eschatology, life after death, heaven, hell, purgatory, or nothing, and freedom. Just what is it? We find it hard to live in the moment, like most animals, dogs and cats and so forth. Today, we suffer from the human condition. The ancient Egyptians of the New Kingdom, it seems, did not. Evolutionary psychology, which is a fairly recent discipline, views the brain as having evolved functional structures by natural selection to address recurring problems of survival and reproduction in their archaic environment, the so-called evolutionary adaptedness environment. We are unfortunately not sure about the human environment of evolutionary adaptedness. For example, how long ago was it where, although modern humans were genetically and anatomically formed 200,000 years ago, so perhaps before then? Nonetheless, we today can infer others' emotions, identify kin from non-kin, identify and prefer healthier mates, cooperate with others and follow leaders, are in conflict with others, including mates and relatives, find that good things taste sweet, and we acquire language, avoid incest, detect cheaters, develop intelligence, are attracted by mate with the opposite sex, forage in sex-specific ways, maintain alliances, solve problems, etc. So, are we still hunter-gatherer under the skin? It seems so. We may be afraid of spiders and snakes, although we may have never seen any before. We're suspicious and afraid of strangers, those who look, dress and behave differently. We are basically monogamous, and women who invest more in any offspring are less inclined to casual encounters than men. Our brains accommodate 7 things at once, known as Miller's 7, typically the size of a nuclear family. We know about 150 people quite well, and that would be typically the size of an archaic hamlet or encampment. And if you go into a supermarket, women shoppers pick items off the shelves swiftly and expertly, like gathering the ripest fruit from just below the eye line or under overhanging branches. Men, on the other hand, shop haphazardly. They avoid rummage or bring and buy sales, but they stay on the other hand, as business executives, closing deals and exhibiting instinctive hunter-driver long after retirement age. So humans mostly adapted to the Pleistocene environment up to perhaps some 300 to 500,000 years ago. Our psychological mechanisms sometimes exhibit mismatches to modern environments. So we're not adapted to living in megacities, that's cities of up to or over 10 million people. Instead, we create psychological neighbourhoods where only we live, with perhaps 10 to 50 neighbours. We fence the garden perimeter, and we are prone to irrational violence against intruders. We ignore and avoid eye contact with others on public transport. We eat in small cafes and fast food outlets like hunter-gatherers on the move. And humans are not adapted to work in large, anonymous bureaucracies with formal hierarchies. We still respond to personalised charismatic leadership in informal, egalitarian settings. And we present psychological duality. We see things as paired opposites which must be reconciled. So black and white, male or female, left or right, friend or foe, for or against. We're not adapted to shades of grey, multiple sexes, fairly safe, half guilty, sitting on the fence, etc. So here are some of the things that you would see as human activity systems. With the advent of technology, people have become adept at designing complex structures. However, they're not so good at designing, if that is even the right word, human activity systems. Unlike technology, humans are unpredictable, inclined to do their own thing, and do not labour continuously. So instead of designing, it is perhaps better to talk of organising, or even self-organising human activity systems, often as teams. The first instance shows a police or peace officer patrol routine, requiring initiative and formal behaviour presently beyond technology. Second is a business with 3 teams designing and producing goods for sale. You can see a design team on the left, an assembly team in the middle, and sales, and on the right you can see a repair team. Last is a military command, control, communications and intelligence system, with teams of people performing those functions in a sequence called information, decision, action. In other words, gather information, make decisions, and then take actions based on the decision. All of these show closet hunter-gatherers using their innate skills to perform functions and solve problems in essentially alien environments. Moving to the city. On the left, marked basis of civilization, you can see how we were during medieval times perhaps, and earlier. You can see that we were tied to the land, we were immobile, with large families supporting labour-intensive agricultures. And the families self-supported from the land. Communities formed from multiple extended families, and there was a self-sustaining order of this agrarian population, and the tempo of life was regulated by the seasons. This goes back to ancient Egypt and before. And of course, religion provided psychological comfort against harvest uncertainties. Religion of all different kinds. Then in the 18th and 19th century, there was the introduction of mechanised farming. So the people who worked on farms found they didn't have any jobs, so they had to go into the cities for work. And so we got an increase in the urban population. The open-headed arrows, by the way, contribute to, and the solid-headed arrows mean detract from. And the urban population was fluid and in continual hunt for work, of which there wasn't enough. This had a tendency to increase the tempo of life, of crowding and stimulation, and developing disorder. And you can see that it tended to break up nuclear families and extended families. And there was a cult of the individual, which there is today with our legal system and so-called human rights, whatever that means. And there's a progressive atomization of urban societies. Communities unravel, and you can see in the bulleted there was a development of class war, celebrity cult, sexual freedom, and equal rights. At the very top you can see gathering behaviour and hunting behaviour. And all of this was going from settled bases of civilization, not always comfortable if there was a shortage of food, but over to the right we got to the basis of decivilization with the increased tempo of life and developing disorder in the cities. Another view of the same, you can see at the top, social engineering, the cult of the individual, leading to cult of competition, social turbulence, mass hysteria at times whipped up by the media, and a loss of the family, which previously had had a calming influence. Loss of faith in science, loss of faith in faith, in fact. And I've added in there, not forgetting social media to really stir things up. It's a complex picture. Generally, the increasing tempo of city life increased social turbulence. There was a general disillusion with marriage, breakdown of traditional family, and a loss of faith in many cultures. To counter this, social engineering introduced political correctness, top left, to prevent people from saying or doing anything presumed to offend others. This was first introduced by Stalin in Soviet Russia. It was backed up by social laws, e.g. hate crimes. Political correctness suppresses free speech. It drives antisocial behaviour underground. And we have found that the police are unwilling to act against ethnic minorities in such circumstances for fear of offending. Hate crimes are open to wide misinterpretation. So wolf whistles described by the police as hate crimes. Bad manners are described as hate crimes. And soon everyone becomes a critic. Humour is effectively banned, and witch hunting becomes the order of the day. It's altogether not too bright. As far as anyone can tell, the family has been the foundational building block of society and civilization for the last 2 million years, give or take. Families in stable monogamous pair bonds, producing and raising balanced, intelligent offspring, able to form stable monogamous pair bonds and offsprings in their turn in unbroken progressions down through the ages. Were it not so, Homo sapiens would not have evolved, survived and flourished despite wars, famine, pestilence, etc. Social engineering in breaking up the family would seem to strike at those foundations and would seem to threaten the civilization that generated it. Societies seem to self-organise class structures. These are observable in chimpanzees, gorillas, and honeybees, of course. The ancient Egyptians had upper, middle and lower classes, with the pharaoh entourage, and provincial governors were upper. Middle class were shopkeepers, chandlers, priests, doctors, etc. Working class were farmers, butchers, fishermen, rope makers, builders. Essentially, those that made, built, caught, toiled, etc. with their hands. Class, it has to be said, appears an essential and inevitable basis of stable society. Social organisations and government may be based on merit, which we would call a meritocracy, wealth, a plutocracy, or suffrage, which we call a democracy. Direct democracy, however, can lead to ochlocracy. It was first tried in Athens in ancient Greece. Only male citizens could vote and had to attend meetings in person. Women and slaves could not vote. They outnumbered the men of Athens 4-1. It flourished under the powerful ruler Pericles, 495 to 429 BC. Pericles means surrounded by glory. He obviously fancied himself. On his death, it reverted to mob rule, or mobocracy. And mob, interestingly enough, comes from the Latin mobile vulgus, meaning fickle crowd. So here we have some more of these levels of organisation. On the left-hand side, it shows the levels of organisation for the early hunter-gatherer. We've seen that left half already. I put it there for comparison. On the right, ethnic cultures take the place of families, but are these the building blocks of civilization? Then, in place of tribal clan, we have multicultural populations with considerable potential for discord and dysfunction. We humans are still instinct-driven under the skin, with fear and dislike of those that differ from us. In place of community, we sometimes substitute atomized community of individuals subject to organisation by social media, with the potential for flash mobs, unrest and riots. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World introduced Soma, a mythical hangoverless happy drug to calm the public. Instead we have mass entertainment, concerts, raves, footballs, World Cups, Winter and Summer Olympics, all to divert the turbulent human mind from more antisocial activities. And now, Desmond Morris, in his book The Human Zoo in 1994. Under normal conditions in their natural habitats, wild animals do not mutilate themselves, masturbate, attack their offspring, develop stomach ulcers, become fetishist, suffer from obesity, form homosexual pair bonds, or commit murder. Among human city dwellers, needless to say, all of these things occur. Does this reveal a basic difference between humans and other animals? At first glance, it seems to do so. But this is deceptive. Other animals do behave in these ways under certain circumstances, namely when confined in the unnatural conditions of captivity. The zoo animal in a cage exhibits all these abnormalities that we know so well from our human companions. Clearly then the city is not a concrete jungle, it is a human zoo. The comparison we must make is not between the city dweller and the wild animal, but the city dweller and the captive animal. The modern human being is no longer living under conditions natural to his species. Trapped not by a zoo collector, but by his own brainy brilliance, he has set himself up in a huge, restless menagerie where he is in constant danger of cracking under the strain. And it seems that we may be cracking under the strain. There has been a noticeable and progressive increase in maladjusted and mentally disturbed young people, with psychosis, phobias, paranoia, schizophrenia, and so forth. Could this rash of disorders be associated with premature exposure of the child, still nominally within the family group perhaps, to disturbing, deviant cultural influences and practices and psychological traumas in formative years, leading, amongst other things, to an inability of many adults to maintain adult relationships in monogamous pair bonds? And on a similar issue, between 1985 and 2005, the average sperm count fell by a third in a study of men, increasing their risk of infertility. The reason for this is also uncertain, but it continues a trend first recorded at the end of World War II. So, where are we going from here? The prospects for the megacity appear, strangely enough, to be diminished by the onward rise of feminism, which seems not to give freedom for women. Instead, it traps women into behaving like men and restricts their opportunity to behave like and to be women. If we follow the tenets of evolutionary psychology, we would avoid this serious mismatch. We would restore the hunter-gatherer propagation system. That should, we hope, reduce mental and social dysfunction among the young, encourage women and men to pair bond in their 20s to create healthier offspring in a nurturing, protective home environment to raise and educate their children, and for the women to send their mate out to hunt, and to restore sexual dimorphism, to restore perhaps the role of the grandmother, and to discourage breakups of the family group, at least until the last child in his late teens or early 20s. Megacities grow from aggregated villages, which become suburbs. Villages maintain their original character, but become varied ecosystems in the megacity biome. And diversity between these ecosystems is important to the megacity survival. Interactions between ecosystems create robust, mutually interdependent megacity subsystems, hopefully in a state of dynamic equilibrium. But there are continuing population increases which stretch the logistics of food, water, energy distribution, and particularly waste management. Concurrent climate change threatens farming areas and food supplies. Megacities will need dedicated food-producing surrounds. It's too risky to depend on globalized food imports right into the future. Potable water will be problematic. Collection, recycling, reverse osmosis of seawater, all of these are energy consuming. And the long-term prospects? Not good. A suburban ecosystem forms part of a megacity biome. It may appear stable, but actually active. People moving about, building, working, shopping, entertaining, aging. People die, businesses die, buildings die, all continually being replaced. Diversity provides robustness, viability, avoids dominance. As parts of one ecosystem, or suburb, goes through a period of relative decline, other parts maintain their viability. Meanwhile, other ecosystems in the megacity biome will also experience similar periods, but generally out of sync with each other. Provided the megacity can maintain diversity both within the suburban ecosystem and between suburbs, then the megacity may flourish. It will, however, be a drain on food supplies, potable water, and especially energy. Increased energy will increase the proportion of time in dynamic equilibrium on the diagram to proportion of relative downtime. Reduced energy, the opposite. And then there is the potential competition between megastates. There is, of course, another way of looking at things, courtesy of Sir Ebenezer Howard, who initiated the Garden City movement in 1902. Self-contained communities containing proportionate areas of residences, industry and agriculture to be surrounded by a green belt. In the figure, the central city has an area of some 12,000 acres and a population of 58,000. Each of the 6 satellite garden cities, that's Garden City, Gladstone, Concord, Philadelphia, Rurisville and Justicia, was to have a population of some 32,000. Also, you can see epileptic farms, hope for inebriates, convalescent homes, homes for waifs, and insane asylums. Several were built, not quite to this design, in the UK and the US. Modern versions could spread across the country, instead of a megacity, or as an adjunct to a megacity, perhaps as an overflow for those who could no longer stand the ever-increasing tempo of city life. We'll return to the Garden City in a few moments. And what of the future? Continuing global population expansion, continuing global warming, continuing rising tides. Sea levels will rise by 15 to 20 metres by 2500 AD, covering islands, invading estuaries, inundating coastal towns, villages and farmland. Potable water, food and energy will be at a premium, with ever more people competing for dwindling resources. Outcome? Well, possibly potential collapse of civilization, or humanity wiped out by natural man-made disease, meteor strike, all-out nuclear war, or sexual potency continuing to fade. or evolved superhuman through advances in medical science, or escape into space, colonization of Mars, Dyson rings, interstellar, intergalactic travel. Meanwhile, in the real world, back here on Mother Earth, crowded humanity will have to spread into deserts, up mountains, and onto and into the sea simply to survive. Here we have a so-called littoral enclave. The foundations were built on shore, possibly before the tide rose. The structures are then raised as tides rise, so that many or most live in parts that are above the mean tidal level. Submerged parts may be viable too, depending on the construction. Could also form undersea viewing areas, perhaps for watching sea life, so perhaps specialised hotels, still attached to shore for essential supplies. Here we see three littoral enclaves built on promontories beyond the shore. So they're built on offshore promontories, raised in tiers progressively as the tides rise, like the Mediterranean islands today, such as Mykonos. They're interconnected by translucent tubes, which you can just see in green. They need potable water and power, energy from the waves, solar, tidal, moon power, food from imports and from surrounding seas. Then there's the undersea city, set in shallow waters with surface light percolating through. There's a central dome with 4 suburbs. The dome houses administration, central police, fire, ambulance, library, university, research labs, shops, plazas, theatres, general hospital and sports arenas. Each of the 4 suburbs has 8 habitats, each able to house and entertain and employ some 5,000 people, mostly living in family groups. Each habitat is like the inverted hull of a modern cruise liner, reinforced to maintain surface air pressure. People live, sleep in cabins, eat commonly in various food halls, with gyms, swimming pools, play areas, theatres, nurseries, etc. The walls of the cabin show above ground external live scenes, both to entertain and to avoid a sense of claustrophobia. The 4 corner towers focus solar energy and can be raised telescopically above the surface to get direct sunlight. Houses up to about 100,000 people. And you can see a view of it there from below water, and you can see the central dome has risen above the tide. Not a bad idea altogether. Here we see a floating city of 5 domed suburbs. One is farmland with grazing animals on the left. 2 are accommodation with theatres, plazas, entertainment and so forth. On the right is the technology dome. Inside, facilities for extracting minerals from seawater sufficient to replicate another floating city over time. And this would house 50 to 100,000 occupants. This is a much larger floating city with a circular tube-like breakwater, creating 6 internal lakes for fishing, fish farming, sea sports, etc. Each suburb would hold about 25,000 people, and the central city about 75,000 people, so making a total of 225,000 people. It can submerge, just to avoid inclement weather. It can also anchor to the bottom to create energy with tidal rise and fall. It looks suspiciously like the Garden City plan. This is an above desert cathedral. It's above ground evidence of a subterranean desert settlement, which relies on deep, ancient underground rivers and lakes of fresh water. The shape is like a termite cathedral designed to ventilate underground habitats. It's watertight at ground level in case of flash floods. The green tubes grow fresh greens, flowers, fruit and grapes using pump water from underground. Other green toroids provide windbreaks for open-air cultivation. 6 spires lead to 6 separate subterranean communities, forming 5 suburbs around a central core. This to encourage diversity in cultural development in each suburb, necessary for the viable overall ecosystem. This is one suburb of 6 in Cavern City. There's 4 islands, each surrounded by water channels. The near island is a modular technological complex, housing industries, schools, hospitals, colleges, etc. The farthest island is residential, with extensive facilities for entertainment and sport. The island to the left, lit by solar light pipes from the surface, consisted of moss-covered rocky hills and rock pools, while that to the right, also lit from the surface, is similar appearance to Mediterranean coastal terrain, richly covered with vegetation and lit through solar light pipes, which move across the cavern ceiling to mimic surface sunlight. 2 islands are for sport and relaxation, but also to absorb CO2 and to emit refreshing O2. Here we see a mountain retreat built above the snow line. 3 very large canisters are shown. There could be more. They are the projection of largely hidden communities into the visible world. The remainder of each community is carved out of the Rocky Mountain interior as caverns, houses, buildings, offices, schools, hospitals, theatres, etc. They're carved out of the solid rock. Extensive, multi-level, multi-storey, multi-suburb communities will exist inside the mountains with sports arenas, parks, shopping plazas, etc., so creating an attractive, pressurised habitat for human city dwellers, ideally located perhaps as a university city, pursuing astronomy, astrophysics, physiological adaptation, global communication systems, etc. Population? About 30 to 50,000, suggesting that many mountains would be required to accommodate the burgeoning population. The orbiting space wheel. People would be living, working on the inside rim of the rotating wheel in this scientific fiction theory. People and atmosphere could be retained by artificial gravity of rotation. It's unlikely to be self-sufficient, however. The occupied wheel would require continuous support from Earth for food, oxygen, water, materials, tools, technology, and waste disposal. So perhaps an expensive and unlikely habitat, and no viable solution to housing an expanding human population, but popular with writers. Here we see a number of rotating wheels set out as a Dyson ring orbiting the sun to catch solar energy, which is almost limitless. Living on there would be a danger to humans from the radiation. So, good physics, but poor biology. But then who knows? Could be inhabited by advanced humans in robotic bodies. Here we see a space-travelling biosphere. It's an enormous drum in space. The biosphere is on the inside of the drum, with its own sun as a light rod on a central axis of rotation. Use? Well, interstellar travel, either launch with breeding populations of diverse life forms, or launch with primitive cellular life and encourage growth and evolution during the lifeboat mission. There's an inside view. You can see a town on the left, other towns in the distance, and horizons. It has 2 horizons, one at left and one at right. Inevitably, some nation, or even the UN, will attempt to control and reverse global warming and the disastrous sea level rises. This could happen, of course, inadvertently through nuclear war or by provoked volcanic eruptions, resulting in clouds of dust and a prolonged nuclear or volcanic winter. But it could also happen more scientifically. Let me present the Sunshield Concept. you can see a mark in the centre called the L1. That's Lagrange point number 1, and it's between the Earth to the right and the Sun to the left. And as it shows right at the bottom, that's a point at which solar gravity, Earth gravity and centripetal forces are in balance. If you place an object at the L1 as the Earth rotates around the Sun, the object will stay there. It's a gravity well. So the idea then is to inject a particle cloud at the L1, and the particles are of such a size that they divert infrared rays coming from the Sun. Not visible rays, not microwaves, but just infrared rays. So you would see no change on the ground. We still got all the light you need for photosynthesis and so forth, but there would be a reduced transmission of infrared, so heating, and that would reduce the temperature. Notice that the cloud would not stay there forever. It would be broken up by cosmic particles, and it might be pulled progressively, hopefully towards the Sun. It's very large, of course. It has to be pretty well the same diameter as the Earth, as shown on this next picture. There we see what's now called the Sun veil on the left, the particle cloud. It's a disk, and we see the Earth on the right. As I say, people on Earth would not see any difference, but over a period of, say, 4 or 5 years, mean temperature on the surface of the Earth would start to drop. It might drop 1 or maybe 2 degrees C in 5 years, after which time things might improve. They might, of course, keep cooling. There tends to be a positive feedback mechanism with these things, and it might get colder and colder. Who knows? So, the prospects for curbing population expansion are poor. Humans will continue to overpopulate until we run out of food, water, energy, even air. In the meantime, we will find ways of accommodating ever more people on ever-reducing land, and we will create ever more people in the usual fashion, but also by advances in medicine, curing of ills, extension of age, and so on. And we will very probably try to fix the global warming, rising sea level conundrum. Good luck to all who save in the Earth's biosphere, that is.